Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Hassick, a staff writer for iHeartBeer.net, and last week our editor came to us and said, does anybody actually plan on brewing this weekend? So, of course I said yes. It's a National Homebrew Day, and every first Saturday in May, sanctioned by Congress, brought on by the American Homebrew Association and assistance of, it becomes National Homebrew Day. And last year, 2014, there were over 400 different events across the nation. Over 2,000, I think 200 batches of beer that were made to equal 17,000 and some change. I think 17,500 gallons of beer. So I am going to contribute today 20 gallons to 2015, 20 plus depending on my efficiency. So I figured I'd do a little bit of recording. This is kind of a how-to, but not too much. It will give you a familiarity about my system and what I brew on and how I brew it when I am at home and I invite you into my abode. And I'm not going to detail it as much, but I'm just going to show you bits and pieces, and that will give you kind of an idea, and we're just going to have fun with it a little bit. On the brew schedule, I had two different summer beers that I'm brewing, and that's why I'm brewing them now, so they're going to be prepared. We did talk about planning a little bit on the show, as well as in some of the writing, so I hope you enjoy it, and I look forward to hanging out with you. Okay, to give you a little bit of an idea about what I'm working with right now, it's always a good idea, like we talked about before, to go ahead and get everything set up ahead of time. So I'll typically end up having it milled or milling it prior to the day before. You don't want to keep it, you don't want to crack it and keep it out there too long, but to jump on it, get ahead of it's not a bad idea. What we've got, in the bags right here, and I know I do sometimes order a lot of stuff offline, some of the grains. More specifically, since I moved, I'm comfortable with the places that I've gotten it before and or the brew shops that were around the area. So I will order from them for very specific beers that I make that are part of my recipe for some more consistency. But when I do get them online, they have the bags and everything as well that come with them, so save them. So if you get the grains where you're from, you could recycle those bags. I keep them, and then I can mill the grains and put them back in those bags for preparation time. So that's also awesome. So what we're looking at there, just some two-row pale malt, some white meat malt, and then some Bry's caramel mixed up in there a little bit as well. Over here, again, it's kind of hard to see, but another bag that you can use. You can use the paper bags for temporary storage to put them in there, and or old used buckets. Looking at a little bit more a two-row, and then in here, wheat flakes, which are easy. They're fun. Some of them are roasted, so you can stick them in the oven, cook them up a little bit the day before, let them chill out, mix them up in there. Depending, it gives you a little bit more of gives you a different taste, I think. So this time around, I chose to go easy with the dry stuff. What I did not do, and I typically would do, is make a starter and get it ready to go the night before, but I didn't. So it's going to be okay. I am using the Safe 04 for one. We're going to be using the Safe 05 for the other. Looking at Optimus Rexus across the board, what I've got, decent hops. I've been using them. They seem to be coming out more prominently in the homebrew stores around here, so it's easy for me to get my hand on a variety of them from it. So you got clusters I'll be using. We got Wilmot, and then Palisade, and then we've got some Cascade. So that's basically everything that we've got for this beer. And then from here we're gonna just heat up some water, and we're gonna go ahead and mash this stuff in. So that's the base start point from what we've got. So we'll see you here at the next step. Okay, so a little bit back, I waited to heat up the kettle first with the my mash water, so that way you couldn't hear the blasting in the background from it for the most part. So next phase right here is very simple. I actually use, and I'm using Beersmith. You can see that there's some deviation in the color for what I'm doing now. I've kind of compensated for that because I'm actually putting a different spice that goes in there I forgot to tell you about, so that will kind of balance it out. But I do use the Beersmith application. It does help out. Pretty much the beers that I do on my own regularly, I already have an idea for, but I can pretty much as probably some of you just go ahead and do it. So it doesn't have to be this complicated. I do like using this because it tracks, and there's a counter, and there's additional tools and software that's on there. Very cheap. I think for the most part, bang for your buck, you definitely get it. I think it's still going for like 20 bucks or something like that. You can put it on 2 different devices. So it's a great piece of gear, and this is what I use. Gives you a great picture of the actual beer that's there. I understand that this one looks a little bit lighter. Again, I've already calculated for that in addition and other specs for me. So although there's this, I still have, and I end up using the clipboard itself with, and I hand jam everything else out. So what I have done while we were going through there is that is my sparge tank. So essentially what I did is I put in the water I needed to. I heated it up. I do not, and one of the things I will caution you is, I've got the temperature gauge and we can put it here, but if you have it here, it's too close to the flame, you do get false readings. So I keep this off, and if I want to double check, I'll put it in there after everything's off just to check the temperature. That way it's not getting blasted by flames. So it sits in there relatively easy, although I am struggling with it right now. We'll just keep it there, it's fine. So Bayou burners, essentially are what they are. Kick-ass piece of gear. Definitely BTUs will put out and can heat up 15 gallons very easily. I keep my tanks below there. My controls are right here as well. On my platform I step up. So here's the kettle. Now from this point, all I'm going to do is I have to hook up my pump. I'm a little bit behind, but I do have a pump and my hoses that I will connect, and I will pump it from here into another mash tun that I got. I'm using the cooler this time just simply because I love it, because it retains the heat very well. I've got this system down fairly good. The coolers, and I have the other tanks and stuff that I use too, but the coolers, I will say this, are probably my favorite, simply because they are they just maintain that temperature so well that you can literally put it in there, walk away, and you're fine. So that's the next step. Well, water's done. The thing I did want to tell you, I do use an external thermostat, and this bad boy travels with you. So I just hook it up. You can get these. Hell, it can be a meat thermostat. It can be whatever. I dangle it, put it down to the top, not the bottom. I let it sit halfway in between the water, somewhere in there, and then I've got this, and it's mobile for me, so I can monitor the temperature as I'm doing everything else. So a little great piece of gear, tidbits to put in there. I do things by 2s or 3s just to double check, so that kind of helps me out. And we can actually take this and convert it, and we'll put it into the mash tun, the actual cooler, when we mash it, and I'll show you that too. So I'm at about 170 degrees. I need my mash in for about 165 for about 75 minutes, so we'll look at moving in that direction here pretty soon. One of the things I did forget to tell you about, though, was there are additional things that I am using for this beer. This is nutmeg from Mexico. So I know it's not traditional, but there are some things that these are the little tidbits and secrets to the one summer recipe that I'm doing it. It turns out to be really great. And I also forgot to tell you that I'm adding in the hull. I do put that in the mash as well with the grains, simply because it helps take out some of that adjunct and stuff too. So you don't have to, but that's what I'm doing. So here it is set. I'm going to get that set up and ready to go, and I'll mash in, and we'll see you here soon. All right, now, so essentially what I did at this point was I got to come back down, but so I took the hot water from the kettle, ran it through my pump. My hose is kind of lying there. Brought it back up to the actual mash tun, and I went ahead and I put the grains in there. So right now we're sitting. What I forgot to tell you too is, I introduced, remember I told you about that color is probably going to be off when it came to the Beersmith system, but I like to put some of this, instead of in the boil, the additional spices into the mash itself. It gives it time for it all to kind of hang out together, I guess, so I should have put the rest of it in just like that, a little bit there, and then I just make sure I stir it and mix it all well. Grain bed's looking good, or will look good. I got enough water. I'm hitting my strike temp. I'm hitting the temp. So all I'll do now is I'll put the lid on there, and we will hang out for an hour and let it do its thing. Okay, so I know it's probably right now a little bit loud. My sparge water is in the tank heating up, and we'll get that to start sparging, and I'll talk about sparge here in a little bit. But what I'm doing now is essentially I'm doing a little bit of first running. So as my sparge water is heating up, and I'm sure you can see inside this hose the color that we've got. Now remember, the Beersmith application had it a little bit lighter, but I added additional things. Now again, this is not a traditional recipe. This is one of my own recipes, and you'll see there's still some unorthodox stuff that I do, but it darkens up a little bit with the first running. So I open it up just slightly and I let it run off until we can get it a little bit clearer. And as you can see, probably very difficult for you here at the bottom of the pan though, there's some grains that are associated with it, so we want to clear that grain bed off. So as my sparge water is getting up to temp before I start sparging, I start running some of this off a little bit. The color right now looks awesome. There are multiple ways that you can do different things, so you can test to make sure conversion happened by using the iodine test. It's okay, but you know, realistically, if you did everything you had to do with the grains that you can get now, you don't have to do that. So really, touching some of it and rubbing it on your hand and feeling if it's really sticky or not, that lets you know if it's good to go. So, you know, drain it out a little bit, get some of that grain bed settled in. I will take this, put it back on top of the sparge tank, and then from there, we'll go ahead and I'll show you sparging next. Okay, so I slightly changed up on you. I gave you some of the other... I changed up the hops. I went back to Hop Union, which was my traditional recipe for this unorthodox one. The Sterling is what I'm using first. That will take the 60-minute boil, and then we'll go into the Cascades, and that's the finishing. So essentially the bitterness will come out of the Sterling. The Cascades will give it a more citrusy aroma type feeling to it. I put them in the bags, these Michelin bags, or muslin bags, or whatever you want to call them, or however they say it. Essentially, just to help kind of stop it, to keep the grains impacted so they're not floating all over the place, and it works well for me. The reason I'm bringing it back on here is because I'm going to take it back over here to the boil kettle, and if you look in there, that's a Sterling bag. So one of the other things that I do as I am transferring very slowly to it, I can go ahead and start my boil as it fills up a little bit more, but I drop the hops in there, my bittering hops in there right off the bat. And I start 60-minute boils when I need. I'll have a little bit more, but I had a little bit more time in there, but it steeps in there a little bit more, and I am quite happy with that, and for those reasons, because it helps, I think, add a little more bitterness to it. Again, not a typical thing. It's a H2X-ism for the most part, but it's just part of this recipe that I do with some other stuff that you'll see. So once we come back, I will at that point have taken between, I'm going to show you the sparging process from the mash tun. The color we have right now is this. It will lighten up a little bit more, but as you can tell, it is dark. It is very good. It's exactly what I was trying to hit. It's in my target range. I did take a reading just to make sure I was there with a refractometer, did the adjustments to it based off of temp. I'll be with the Beersmith program, and you know, I'll do another one. I know I'm good. That just gave me a safe feeling, I guess, to go ahead and move forward before I started sparging with the amount of sparge water I'm going to use. So, all right, next we'll come back, we'll be sparging. Okay, so we're about ready to sparge. If you take a look down there from up here, it's a beautiful view, and if you went further down, you can see right there is that hops bag, already steeping with the Sterling that's in there. I brought it back because I'm going to fire up the burners again, and you don't see anything running simply because as soon as I fire up those burners, you're not going to hear anything. So I kind of did a pause on it, but the intent is, you know, with your typically quarter turns and let it go really, really slow, and with the sparge too, it just trickles out. So you can see the grain bed that's there. And then just sparging it is nothing more than taking that, what I've got, 160 degree water, and I feather it a little bit, and I let it come back and forth like so. Very slowly, I feather in and out until I get a little bit of water that's on top of that grain bed, and I try to balance the flow I don't let it go. I monitor it. I sit here. This is one of the things for this beer more specifically I think can help out and making me more effective at getting my efficiency up. So it'd be a very slow, if you can see here, a little quarter turn, and you can see it coming out there on the bottom. Ever so slowly, little drips that are there. So my sparge water is in my sparge tank. That I have propped up here, so it's in my sparge tank, and then all I do is, again, I monitor this, and as it slowly goes down, I simply do a little back and forth. I feather it out, and it's a dance between me and the brew kettle is down there at that point in time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off so I can fire up that brew kettle. You won't hear it when that burner's on. So we'll be back. Next thing will be the actual boiling process. Okay, so I know it's probably hard to hear, but we got boil. I am obviously, I still let gravity do its thing to capture whatever I can out of the mash tun still. But we're where we got to be. I mean, I've got 14 gallons and change, and that's good. A little bit less than I tried to pull out, top it off 15. But, so with that, you can't see it. There's a few oranges that are floating around there somewhere. I did put orange peels in there. One of the things that I do, and I'm trying not to, you know, we just hit the hot break. So I might have to put this down for a second, control the temperature, because my water bottle is across the room. So I'll either spray with a water bottle, bring the temp down. But we got hot break. There is orange peels that are actually in there. Again, an unorthodox method, but it's one that I've used for this recipe. It turns out really, really good. So from here, after we get done with this, we are going to move to go ahead and chilling it and then putting it in the fermenter. So looking good, gravity's good, checked it, everything else is on point. You kind of see the orange peels in there a little bit. We got great hot break right now, rodeoing that stuff in, perfect. So we'll see you here when it comes to chilling this stuff down. Alright, 30 more minutes left in the boil. Everything's kind of settled. I got a nice decent boil there. I dropped my Cascade hops in there. I do know, I think I told you when I had out the Safe 04 and 05 yeast, but for this one, when we go, just so you know, I'm going to be using the Safe 06, WB 06. It's one of my favorite yeasts. It does some really unique things when it comes to the fermentation processes, and it's never failed me, especially for my summer beers and stuff. So again, we'll zoom in a little bit, slightly unorthodox. It's got you know, an amber tinge, and you can see some orange peels floating by, but I tell you, it will come out very crisp. It's got a very unique taste to it, and again, even with Beersmith, as you've seen, as you start brewing or you have your brew process down, you know the different elements from your system and what you're doing. And for instance, I understood that even though it told me it was going to be too light in color, this is actually darker in color. And that is simply because I took the nutmeg and I put it into the mash. Now, if I took the nutmeg and put it into the boil, completely different dynamics. The flavor would be there, but the taste would be a little less prominent, I think, or as you were, a little more prominent. But in the mash, it adds more to the color, and the taste isn't there as much, so it's not over prominent. It doesn't overwhelm it, not like a holiday beer would be. If it was a holiday beer, I would put it in the boil. And these are things you can twist and play around with, but it's going to be a decent beer. It looks good. I'm going to go over the fermentation process here next, and as you were the cooling process, and then put it in the fermentation bins for the primary, and I'll show you that too. So that's pretty much what's coming up from there. I got to make a decision. I got two things I could do. I could place or chill it with a wort chiller or a wort plate. I'm probably going to go with the wort chiller because it's what everybody typically uses. The wort plate, so I'm telling you, it's a great piece of gear. I'll show you that too, but it cuts your time down when it comes to cooling in half. So we'll cover that when we come back. But looking good now for the boil. 60 minutes. The Sterling's been in there. And then as well as I dropped the orange peels in there around the same time, and then another 30 minutes for the Cascade boil to give it that flavorful aroma that we're looking for, and then we're going to be cooling. So when we come back to cool. Okay, so I went with the wort chiller, The one thing I will tell you about the wort chiller, I've got the ends taped up there. If you're going to use that for your to cool down, and that's typically what everybody uses to cool their wort down. I would suggestion is you know, the last 10-15 minutes of oil, put it in there. I have it taped up here. Everything's been sanitized, but I do have it taped. I let it drip over the edge of the pan or whatever. It doesn't matter here in the brew shop of H2X at this point. Bluntfloor's Brewing, we don't matter to us because it can get on the floor. And when you put it in there, understand there's probably water that's still in there, and as it gets hot, it will boil out the ends a little bit and spit and it gets hot. So be careful of that, as well as if you don't want that, you can try to blow it out, and you know, basically blow on one end and push it out, but you'll still get some that are in there. You can clean it. That's great, and that's fine. Star sand will help it, but you never know. So what I do is I sanitize as well as keep it in the boil for a little bit. I do, and there are some people will tell you that, you know, you can taste a copper tinge to it if you do it X, Y, and Z, but I don't see it. So this is it. Now, the typical way I end up usually doing it is right here. This is a wort plate chiller. Great piece of gear. It will cool down 15-20 gallons in a matter of minutes. This takes a little bit longer, but I figured since, you know, I was taping this for the average Joe and the brew day, this is typically what they have, and it will work. So, but my suggestion for you is obviously go ahead and put it in there for the last few minutes of the boil to at least get it cleaned up no matter what. Cut the boil, turn the cold water on, and in between then, I keep every sanitizing tool that I've got. I will, and I don't have it now, but it's over across the room, but my temperature gauge I set on the side of the wort chiller. That way, as it chills, I stir it with this, check my temperature, and when I get anywhere between 70 to 60 degrees, I then transfer it to the primary fermentation bin. So that's it for the chilling, even though we haven't started yet, but that's what I'm doing. You can tell, look at the color, it's dancing around a little bit. I'm excited. Looks like a great beer's coming. Okay, so the next step, everything's cooled, we're good to go. I got my refractometer here. It's what I typically end up using. I pulled it out. If you have not seen one, it looks like this. Great piece of gear. Trying to maneuver the best I can with his hand. So it's got a little droplet. It's a little bit better than the Thief if you take out, simply because, you know, it's smaller amount that you have to take out. You take it, you drop it up on the dropper, you close it, you go underneath a light and it will give you a reading. Most of them that you buy will actually have this, which is a little bit of an adjustment tool that you can use as well. So yeah, great piece of gear. We'll see. I'm going to pull from this, get my reading, and after I get my reading for my original gravity, at that point, you know, if it's still good, we're at probably around 80 degrees right now, and then we'll drop it in the fermenting bins, fermenting vessels, and then we'll continue on. So we'll be right back. Okay, so I had to come outside, so you're going to hear additional noise, but you will notice that an interesting view on this is with the refractometer. You're looking at almost 1.050, probably 1.051 is what I was targeting, or 50, so we're looking at 5.1. So my original gravity is right there. I'm moving it around a little bit because you look at bricks, you got 10, 11, and then 12. It goes up to 15 right there, so we're at 10, 11, 12, almost 13 right there, which brings you to 1.050. If you go further down, it does have specific gravity, wort, and it bounces back and forth between the bricks percentage, which is right there, and the gravity of the wort, which is right there. So there are tools that you can end up using with this piece of gear later on that can do the conversions for you based off of temperature and things like that. So you can actually use a refractometer, not just initially. You have to do some adjustments between every other phase. But like, again, like Beersmith, and there's other things that you can find out there that are free that will be able to, you can dial in that bricks percentage and it will actually give you the reading like a hydrometer. It takes a little bit, a couple eye drops out there, jump out there in the sun and or underneath the light, and this is what you got. Okay, so hope you can kind of see that. A little bit of a weird reading, but that's what we got. So now we're going to move into the fermentation. Okay, so what we end up having finally, you know, everything worked out rather well. Those are some pretty big jugs. We lost a little bit, no big deal. What you haven't seen is the other batches already being done, so it's like back-to-back batches. But this is the dark summer ale. It's got nutmeg. It has orange peels and a bunch of other stuff that I showed you. So this is the one that, you know, it comes out to be probably about 5.66%, a little bit bumped higher than it should be. The dark color comes more from the nutmeg than the actual grains. The orange peels contribute a unique bitterness to it. So you want to talk about some off-centered ales, that is what we've got. So that's first batch done, and I hope you enjoyed what we had for National Homebrew Day. And I want to thank you know, my boy, who probably knows how to make beer more than most people, because he's my sidekick through it, especially if I'm busted up my hand. So God bless you, man, and I hope everybody has a great National Homebrew Day, and your brewing continues on as we continue to brew. Still watch us on iHeartBeer.net, H2X the show, as well as read the articles from all the great writers, staff writers and guests included, and I hope you enjoyed it and had a great National Homebrew Day.